Okay, welcome back. We're still on page 56 talking about whether or not your organization requires somebody to be a professional project management or not, that certification. Sounds like a plug for the PMI, but that's okay. Continuing on page 57, to talk about the project life cycle. So you recall that the whole idea is you break these things up into phases so that they're easy to manage and these work breakdown structures. Every once in a while, you'll have deliverables. You'll have okay, at this point in their project, I'm going to produce a report or something like that. So although the project kind of moves from left to right in a Gantt chart view, there could be some very distinguished points in there where go and no-go points that you need to deal with. And of course, a project can have more than one of those things. So here's basically a simple view of a project. And so the project feasibility, they say, have a concept part and then a development part. And then the project acquisition, which means you're actually ready to do it. You're going to be implementing and then you're going to be doing some sort of a closeout. So they view feasibility as the first half and acquisition as the second half. And so let's look at this for a minute. First of all, when you start one of these projects, the beginning uncertainty level is pretty high. You don't know much at the beginning, right? You're starting off and you're going, I don't really know what it is we're doing yet. We're just starting into it. I don't know how much it's going to cost. And so uncertainty is pretty high. And when you first start the project, you're probably not spending that much cash. This phase, this concept phase, could be just a team of maybe 2 or 3 people. That's it. Where when you get into implementation, you're going to have to hire 30 or 40 people to pull it off. So at the beginning, it doesn't cost you much, and you don't know much. So your uncertainty is high, but your cost is low. So let's go through the concept thing. So at the beginning, concept. Yeah, this is where you're going to be building a team, okay? You're going to be investigating alternatives, because it could be that you're going to start a project and somebody says, well, we need a tablet for, students. And you go, oh, let's go build one. And then somebody says, well, wait a minute, let me do a quick internet search to see if anyone else has already got that. And you go, hey, look, looks like this company already has it. Why don't we just have them come in and do it for us? And the whole project, it goes, thump. Okay, you're done with that project because there's already a commercially viable, well, maybe not done with the project, but you don't have to do hardly any of that. You just contract out for the guy who'll come in and do all the training and everything else. Okay, the point is alternatives. You start with kind of a rough estimate. This rough estimate is basically, here's my best guess, but I don't really know yet. And what are you going to be producing at the end? Well, you're probably just going to be producing just a few top-level work breakdown structures. Like I'm going to need to have a design phase, and I'm going to need a testing phase. Just high-level stuff. And then with the development, this is where you're actually going to come up with the project management plan. This is where you're actually going to start, like firing up, Microsoft Project starts plugging things in. And you're going to come up with what's called a budgetary cost estimate, or what I call a realistic cost estimate. Something that you're going to be able to take to management and say, here's how much this thing is going to cost. Here's how much you need to budget for this thing. And of course, you could stop right there. They'll say, that's a great idea. We'll put that on the list for next year, right? Okay. And so here, you're probably going to go down to like the 3 levels of the work breakdown structures. So because this budgetary estimate needs to be in sufficient detail that you can say, okay, this is going to cost me, $200,000. Can I have, mother, may I please have $200,000? You don't want to come back and then miss it by 100%. Go, oh yeah, I'm sorry, it really $400,000. So that's why you need at least like 3 levels of WBS to be able to get that point. Obviously here, you're going to get the approval to proceed. There's going to be a go, no-go at the end of this development phase. Because now you're going to say, okay, it's going to cost $200,000, and they're going to say yes or no. Okay. And then you go to the implementation. Well, that's where you get the honest-to-God final cost estimate. Now you really, really, really know how much it's going to cost. This is where you actually start the work. So you build the dang thing, whatever the dang thing is. And during this time, this is when you start doing your performance reports. If you remember how we did in the Appendix A, where you put your estimates in, then you lock it down, and then you track your changes from there. And so you can see track your progress against, here's your forecasted expenses and here's your actual expenses, that kind of stuff. Cool. And then finally, and this phase could last a really long time. I mean, if you're building a hospital, that could be a couple of years. If you're building a piece of software, it could be a couple of months. And then finally we get to closeout, and that's where you do your final report. Typically one of the things you need to do when you loop back around to the end is, did you accomplish what it is you said you were going to accomplish? What was the business need for this particular project? And I mentioned to you guys that in my world, you had to have a demonstrable goal that was measurable. You couldn't just say, I want to increase customer satisfaction, because there was no way to measure that. You had to have some sort of a measure. So you could say, I'm going to institute a survey before, then a survey after, and I'm anticipating this project is going to increase customer satisfaction by 10%. Okay, that's a measurable goal. That's when you're going to have to go back and do this. That's when you're going to have to go back and say, did we accomplish what it is we said we were going to accomplish? Okay, cool. And then finally, of course, you do your final report and you disband the team and you fire up the next project. Cool? All right. So on page 59, they talk about the system development lifecycle, the SDLC. And software development is kind of a subset of IT projects, but it makes for a pretty decent way of describing these things. So basically, there's two different ways you can do an SDLC. One is called the predictive mode. And so I already know a great deal. I mean, I kind of sort of know how this is going to go. I know there's very little uncertainty. I know what the features are pretty much. I kind of sort of know how much it's going to cost. And so in good faith, I could come up with an estimate and it'd probably be right. We could just follow that path. And the other is called the adaptive. And the adaptive approach is, we really, really don't know what the customer really wants. And so the only way we're going to find out is if we just start down that path and then just discover, as we're moving towards the goal, we're going to discover where the goal is. Okay? So the predictive, I probably know where the goal is and it probably isn't going to move. Adaptive is, I kind of sort of know where the goal is and it likely is going to move. Okay? See the difference? Cool. All right. So, in one way of looking at it is what's called the waterfall model. This is part of the SDLC. So I do some sort of analysis, and the analysis is, just like we talked about before, the analysis is this even possible? I mean, perhaps there's a legal requirement that won't make this work, all sorts of feasibility. Then I have to do some design, and then I actually build the dang thing, and then I test it, and then I end up winning support. And typically you don't loop back around. In other words, when you're done with the analysis, you're done. And when you're done with the design, you're done. And that's the traditional approach. This works pretty good, like if you're building a building, okay? Well, I'm designing a building, and during construction, I rarely have to go back and go, wait a minute, let's redo the design. I mean, it happens, but you know what I'm talking about. And so another way of looking at this same thing is a spiral, where I start with analysis and go to the design and go to implementation and testing, and then I just keep going. I just keep going over and over and over, so each one of these things loop back at each other. So I'm done with the testing and go, that was pretty good, but I bet we could do this a little better. So you go back to the analysis, do the design, do the implementation, do the testing, and they go, that feature you added was absolutely pretty good, but let's see if we can add this feature. And so that goes back to the analysis and back to design. And so kind of a spiral model. Okay, the waterfall model is the traditional approach, and quite frankly, probably isn't used that much. Okay, it's one step at a time, and it really works well for that predictive kind of a view. The spiral it's iterative, but not linear. I mean, you do have steps, they just don't occur in order necessarily. And most software, you start here. And the reason why is, again, it's breaking things into smaller chunks. Here's the software. Here's everything you want it to do. Okay? But that's not how you build it. You don't build it like that. You build this one chunk and get it working. And then you build this chunk and get it working. And build this chunk, and then you do integration testing to make sure all the pieces actually talk to each other. You don't tackle the big project all at once. You just get it going. Get it going fast. Get people to see it, and then you can start adding the features to it as you go along. Okay. So there's another technique in addition to these two they just talked about. One of them is called the incremental build, which is basically what I just described, where you start small and you come up with, what was called a minimal viable product. Here's it works, okay? Doesn't do everything, but it works. And then you show that to people to get their feedback and their buy-in, and you go proceed. The other one is called prototyping. And prototyping is really, really cool when you have a scenario where people basically can't articulate what they need. Okay, I'm going to tell you yet another war story. All right, so 10 million years ago, we had a financial system in place, and we were going to replace it with a new enterprise resource management tool, an ERP. And for reasons that are not immediately clear, they decided they were going to do just a complete cutoff. In other words, one day this one's going to go down, and the next day this one's going to be up. Okay, there was no overlap whatsoever. Well, our budget people were freaking out, and they came to me and said, I don't have much of a degree of confidence here. Could you just write us a little program that just takes the daily labor cost and total them up for us, so we can verify that the stuff going in is making sense? We don't have any real whatever the term is I'm after, confidence that the system is working right. I said, okay, so what you want me to do is you want me to basically just print out the data for the labor costs against the cost codes. And they went, yep, that's what they want. Cool. That's what I did. Wrote them a program that all it did was just spit out the worker, what his pay rate was, and what accounting code he was charging his time to. Okay, that was it. So I went by, and I see him there, and he's got a little yellow highlighter, and he's going, I said, what are you doing? He says, well, we need to be able to sort this by the account codes. And I went, oh, well, why didn't you say that? I can do that. So I made a revision to my application, so it's sorted by the accounting codes. And so then the next day I come by, and it says, hey, is everything fine? It's great. It's exactly what we wanted. And so I look over, and I see somebody with a calculator going, I said, what are you doing? He said, well, I'm adding up these columns. I went, well, why didn't you ask me? Oh, okay. So the third revision of the application was to sort and to total those things. And the point of the story was they could not articulate the requirements. They didn't have the right frame of mind. They did not know what was possible and what was not possible. There was no way. There was no frame of reference for them to ask for what they actually wanted. But when I provided them a thing, then they could point to it and say, well, I need it sorted by this. I need these costs totaled up by that. So only through a prototype could they actually articulate their requirements. Okay, that's the point of that story. One more time. One of the cool things about prototypes is it helps people articulate the requirements in scenarios where they could not possibly do it otherwise. Good. All right. Whew. So the next thing to talk about is RAD. And these are all these special tools out there. There are an awful lot of productivity improvement type of tools for doing rapid application development. And, templates and all sorts of goofy things that speed up the implementation of an application. You don't have to write your own dang menus. You can pull one off the internet and plug it in your application. That kind of thing. So lots and lots of automated tools. Okay, the next section talks about that adaptive software design. Remember we talked about predictive versus adaptive? So the ASD, they have a cool acronym for it. Once again, this is because the requirements are not known in advance. And this typically is when you have like a consumer product. Let's say I'm building a new phone, and I kind of sort of know what it needs to do, but I really want this phone to stand out. And so to do that, I need to be able to talk to the customers because I don't know what it is they want. Okay, this is a good place to stop for the 15-minute mark, and we'll pick this thing up again in just a few.